think Father Pat mentioned, or you've already figured out, that both he and I, and many of our Holy Cross priests and brothers come from education. And one of the things that we learn in education school is something called Bloom's taxonomy. And memorizing is the lowest form, and then you go up the pyramid until you're creating. And it's a wonderful pyramid. It shows you need to find higher levels of thinking and analysis, and get beyond just mere rote memorization. But I always commented, but you got to start with memorization. You have to have something in your toolbox to analyze and discern, and finally, you've got to have things that you've memorized before you can create. Because that's how hierarchies work. You start from the lowest, and then you can only do the highest level of learning and thinking when you've mastered the lower ones. And we have also Maslow, psychologist or sociologist or somewhat, has another hierarchy, and his hierarchy talks about hierarchy of needs. And the first level of need is food and shelter and warmth and the basic necessities of life. And then you go on up the ladder until you have, civilization and self-actualization. That the basic needs in life are food and shelter and safety, and then you move up with greater needs. Once you've satisfied that first level of need, then you can go on and concern yourself with building a society and becoming a fully formed human being with good sense of self and charity to others. And I think we see that in the way our God talks about food so much in the Bible. We have the story of Exodus in our first reading, where the people were freed from slavery, and you'd think they'd be thrilled and happy until they got hungry. And then they begged for food. And so God provided food. Because even if you're free from slavery, even if you're away from the Egyptian tyranny, you're not going to be fulfilled and happy and satisfied until you have food. And eventually they would move to the promised land, and they'd be able to begin a society and begin to build homes and houses and become a culture again. And so the Maslow pyramid could continue, but the food was important. And Jesus says the same thing in our gospel. You were looking for me not because you saw signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. He had given them food, loaves and fishes. He had satisfied their lowest level of need. And then they were clamoring to him because they seemed to want more. But Jesus says, you've got to get to the next level. You've had food. Now you need food from heaven. Now you need to understand where food comes from, where all your gifts come from, that God is the source of everything. And he goes so far as to say, I am the bread of life. That is to say, follow me. I will show you the Father. I will help you to come to complete and full realization of who and what you can become because of God. One of the ministries of our parish is to satisfy that basic lowest level of need, food. And we do so with the expectation that if we provide food, then perhaps the next levels of need can also be filled. Until we feed folks, until we give them what they need to survive on a daily basis, and that would also include security and a place to shelter. Until we do those things, we can't expect people to live full and complete lives and to be satisfied and to be good citizens and participate in society. It becomes part of our self-realization as we who have food and security and safety to realize that we need to help others as well. Jesus calls us to a higher level. And one of the problems we have, I think, in our society, for those of us who do have food and security and stuff, is that we sometimes fixate on that level. And we accumulate more stuff, more things, more food, more riches, more wealth. And we think that that's the pinnacle. We think that that's the top. But in reality, we're just satisfying the lowest level of our needs. And that God calls us to a greater level of awareness, a greater level of being, to be connected to God, to share not in a feast of great food, but in simple bread and wine that we recognize to be God's presence, to be the presence of Christ in the world that we share, because our greatest need is not for the lowest level, the food and security, but our greatest need is God. Let us pray that our life's trajectory moves to a greater appreciation of God in the world. Let us stand now and proclaim our faith.